Hi everyone and welcome to this week's edition of Catherine Lorimer's Guide to Life podcast. I don't usually play that much music. I thought, change is as good as the rest. Might as well give it a go. Hope you're okay. Usually, and this week it's a podcast about something else to do. And I had a really, really great idea. I still have a good idea. I've got somebody that I really want to interview. Unfortunately, I got COVID. And it would be not responsible to to interview her because she's a little bit older than me. Although a lot fitter, if I say. So I'm going to do it in January instead, I think, because I've got some ideas for Christmas ones. I've already started doing things for Christmas gifts and stuff like that. So I'm going to do that one instead. So this month, it's all mashed about completely, okay? So we're going to do a ghost one this week. I can't remember what I'm doing next week. We're 15th. No idea what I'm doing on the 22nd. I don't know. I'll sort that out when we get to there. Actually, that was supposed to be a ghost one, wasn't it? Yeah, the 22nd. So obviously I'll have to find something else to do. That's fine. I've got that covered. It'll be fine. I'll do a Christmassy one. I've got another idea. So anyway, I hope you're okay. My voice, as you can hear, is a little bit croaky. I think it's COVID. I thought it's the flu. I have been really seriously poorly for me, like not eating really hardly anything. I'm about to decamp to the other half's house for a week so he can help me because I'm really struggling. I'm really tired and everything's just a bit of an effort at the moment. Okay, so this week now is going to be about ghosts again. So I thought, I've got to say it's a really, really busy month for me in November and December. I can't even say the words. Oh dear, this doesn't bode well, does it? Hopefully it'll improve as we go along. Although I did have an issue and I'm thinking, when I first turned the console on, I'm like, why can't I hear anything? And I forgot to put my headphones on. That gives you an indication. When I left the other half's house yesterday, he's like, have you got everything? And I realised I hadn't got the dog. Nearly left Pippa there. So it was, so that's how we're doing at the moment. Yeah, that's how my brain is at the moment. So not doing anything too important. But anyway, yeah, so as I say, Mr. Bumble and I want to go and visit some places, some ghosty places. But I think that's going to have to wait until sort of January, February time now. And we'll just do, so I've got an idea for a ghost story. I'm going to have a go at writing my own ghost story and then reading it out to you guys. That's for December, okay? So hopefully that all comes off okay. Or we'll see how it goes. And so I thought I'll just do a little research into some ghostly sightings really near to where I live. Because fairly near to where I live, there's like the most haunted building in Wales, I think. I can't remember what it's called. It's a big mansion and it's not open to the public, unfortunately, at the moment, but it has been. And they have done lots of ghosty things there and there have been loads of sightings. So I'll probably do that as a special podcast at some point in the future. But I thought, right, okay, let's have a little hunt around. I live not too far from Mold in North Wales. And I thought, right, okay, let's have a hunt around to see what ghosts we've got in Mold. And I came across this story, okay, because obviously I'm analysing whether or not we think it is a ghost, okay, or it's not a ghost, it's just kind of a rumour. And is there any kind of credibility to the story? Because that's what, life's all about. We should be constantly analysing everything rather than just going, oh, that looks great on social media. We're saying, oh, that looks great. How can we prove that it's actually true? Because there's so much fake news out there at the moment. So that's what we're doing with this. And as I say, it's when I came across this story, it's the first time that I've actually heard about sort of spiritual experiences being linked to treasure, okay, which is why you can tell I'm a bit sceptical on this one already, can't you? Yeah, absolutely. But no, I'll try and stay positive, but I am a bit sceptical on this one. So this story dates back to and I'm using it already, aren't I? Story, yeah. This tale, I suppose tale is a story, but in 1833, okay, a John Langford purchased land, okay, he was a land agent basically for Big Estate, Leeswood Estate. And he bought some land on behalf of the Leeswood Estate on the 11th of October. Okay, I'm going to attempt to pronounce it. It won't be right, okay? It was Bryn Yellen, and it won't be anything like that. My Welsh pronunciation is quite appalling. Apologies. But it's on the outskirts of Mold. And there was a big kind of mound of earth, okay, on this particular site. And they thought, well, that's no use. We've got to shift that. So he commissioned somebody, a couple of blokes with shovels, probably back then in 1833. They won't have been able to use a JCB. Now it would have just been like, right, let's just scoop the whole lot up and chuck it somewhere else. And it would have been job done in about an hour, including time for have a drink of coffee. Anyway, so they had to, flatten the mould of earth on the land. So they were like digging in and probably chucking the soil everywhere and maybe burying it about a bit. And they say there were upwards of 300 or 400 pebbles and stones on this mound, which might have given a bit of an indication, okay, that it was probably quite important. And usually if, I don't know if you've only seen kind of the old sort of like Western stories where they cover people in rocks and stones when they bury them. Yeah, you know where I'm going with this one, don't you? They might have realised that actually, do you know what? It's an important tomb. But anyway, it soon became clear, okay, they were digging into a prehistoric tomb. Bones were discovered, and also beads, and then also a golden corset and kind of a golden poncho. And it is actually worth having a look at this one. It's called the Golden Ghost of Mould, if you have a Google of it. Because actually, ironically, it's one of the most important finds, okay, in the British Isles to date. And it's from early Bronze Age, around 1900 BC, so before Christ, okay? So good indication that we were around then, before Christ, in the early Bronze Age. And we also had gold, because it was a gold thing. And also this was clearly somebody who was seriously significantly important to have been buried in this big mound of earth, in a gold thing. So obviously, you know, he's never not going to. And you kind of wonder, don't you? I bet you somewhere someone has got some information passed down through generations locally of who this person probably is, but they'll probably keep it themselves. But anyway, so this was all found here. And a Reverend Clough, okay, lived in the parish at the time at the discovery, and he wrote a letter at the time telling this bizarre tale, okay? And here's the sceptical bit, because obviously prehistoric tomb, you're digging into it, you know, you've heard all sorts of rumours, haven't you, about when Tutankhamun is, and you go into his pyramid and all sorts of strange things have happened. So, you know, I was kind of expecting something with this. But anyway, apparently he heard the tale of an elderly woman, okay, who's visited Mould, so she's very local, to collect her husband from the public ale house. Now, I would be questioning, did she have a drink with him? You know, were women allowed to drink in those days from the ale house? I don't know. I should do. I wrote an essay on it when I did part of my history degree, but I can't really remember. In fact, yeah, they probably did. They probably ran it, didn't they? I reckon she's had a couple of pints of ale with her husband in the pub. And she'd drag him home, led him home, and apparently she saw a vision of a mound of earth wearing a coat of gold going across the road in front of her. I mean, how likely is that? Really, seriously. In my personal opinion, as lovely as the story is, it's probably more realistic because it was the same day that she actually heard the story in the pub. Maybe wanted a little bit of kind of kudos. Maybe she's a bit jealous of her husband because she obviously had going and collecting him and kind of wanted some attention on her. Maybe he was like a really popular guy, you know, and she was like, well, I want some attention on me. We don't need these things. So you have to kind of have a think about, you know, how likely is it that somebody actually saw the vision of a mound of earth wearing a gold coat cross the road in front of you. Yeah. Again, some of the ones that I spoke about on the Chester tour guide, though they're seen by drunk people. Yeah, I'm highly skeptical of those, you know, because your kind of imagination, you know, kind of maybe goes away with you a little bit if you've had something to drink. So I'm not sure about that one, if I'm honest. But I'm going to leave that one there for now and continue to the next tale. Okay, so now this one, okay, is, again, a little bit more believable. Okay, so as a house, Wrexham Street, Mould. Have I got the number down there? No, I haven't, but it's not there anymore anyway. It's been torn down and something else built in its place. And it's a ghostly encounter that happened in the 1880s, and an exorcism took place around that time as well. And it was the tale that I read, it was actually written by the person's, like the grandson, okay? So it's clearly a family story, which gives it a little bit more credibility as well. And apparently this house, it was I saw a picture of it. It's like a normal family terraced house. And as I say, it was actually the guy's grandparents. And they kind of like been living in this place for a while. And there's all these sort of random things that were going on. that had kind of been ignored, or they just sort of live with them. Anyway, in the evening, a fire chair, when they'd be sitting around the fire, a fire chair would appear beside them from the table, okay, beside the resident who was knitting, so the grandmother. And the chair, obviously an empty chair, but it just got moved there. And then it would be there for a while. And then after a while, after they'd sat by the fire next to the grandmother who was knitting, the chair then went back to its place. And this was a regular occurrence, but I suppose if you kind of get used to things, then, but this used to happen. Door latch would often be lifted and the door would open and close. So that's a little bit strange, isn't it? Almost as if somebody is kind of living in the house at the same time. Now, one morning, okay, it actually saved the lives of a group of local colliers in Oak Pits. Okay, so the old couple who lived in the house were having breakfast about 4:30 in the morning, because they started at the pit at 6, and obviously they'd have probably had to walk all the way there, which is a bit of a trek. And as they were having breakfast, okay, there was a knock on the back door. And the elderly woman got up to answer it, but there was no one there. So she went and sat down again, slightly bemiffed probably. There was another knock on the door, and she got up again, okay, slightly bemiffed, when she found out, and opening the door at 4:30 in the morning, probably a bit nippy, letting all the cold air in. Then there was no one there. So she's like, right. So the same thing happened again. And this time the husband of the house took his collier's lamp to the door, and he saw that, and again, he opened the door, there was no one there, but he saw that it had been snowing and there were no footsteps in the snow, which is a bit strange. Anyway, on returning, it obviously given him some sort of significant amount of unease for this man. So obviously they must have built up kind of, I know it's a bit bizarre, but they must have built up some kind of relationship with the spirit that was living in the house. Because on returning, the elderly man said to his wife, do you know what? He said, I'm not going to go to work in the pit that day. Obviously, he just had a feeling and something just felt off to him. And, and how many times we get those feelings, and how many times have you heard people saying, I was supposed to be getting that aeroplane, but actually I didn't, for some reason it didn't feel right, and then it crashes. And there's loads of stuff like that. People do have these feelings, and I've always said, if you have that feeling that you shouldn't travel somewhere, then don't do it if you think there's a risk for some reason, because usually quite often these feelings do turn out to be right. And consequently, because he hadn't gone, his whole gang who were on contract didn't go down the cage either. I'm guessing that I don't understand how mining worked, but I'm assuming that they maybe contracted to go down as a group, and because there was one short, maybe they didn't go. I don't really know. But that morning on the site, okay, where they would have been working in the pit, it fell in. And they all would have been killed or drowned had that guy gone to work. So, that's kind of a bit of a strange one. But then they had it exercised, which I find a little bit strange, because if this person has saved your life, would you still kind of want its presence in the house? Yeah. But how did it know that the pit was going to be, is there kind of some link? Can the spirit see into the future? I don't know. I find that all kind of a little bit, I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on the whole pit story. Certainly the chair beside the fireplace and the door latches being, open and closed. Yeah, that's definitely plausible. I've heard loads of examples of things like that being happened. So again, you have to kind of be a little bit skeptical about these things. Okay, so next one is it a little bit more? I haven't got a date on this one, but actually, I think it was, I didn't put the date down, but I think it was 1980 something. So it's a lot more into the future. And it's the Pennyford Farm Nightmare. Okay. And apparently there have been muffled voices in empty rooms, okay, figures appearing, children singing, carvings, stains appearing on the walls. A large wooden owl moved across the house on its own. And a pregnant girl appeared on the patio and then disappeared. But obviously she wasn't from this time. Now, you're thinking, and clearly I read the whole story. It was actually, I think it was on the BBC. They were looking into doing some sort of documentary about it. And there is a kind of a story that I'll tell you a bit later on, which is a bit bizarre. But it turns out events started at this house when they moved a gravestone of a 15-year-old girl, okay, that was propped up in front of their home. Well, immediately you kind of think, why would you do that? I mean, I can kind of assume that why you would want to move a gravestone, because, it's not really very welcoming, is it? If you've got visitors coming, we've got next door neighbours going round. Can you just shift the gravestone, because it doesn't really look very friendly? But it's probably been placed there for a reason. And again, it goes with the whole sort of tomb thing. So, and apparently it said Jane Jones on it. Okay, that was a name. And she died in childbirth. Okay, and they wouldn't allow her, the parish wouldn't allow her to be buried in consecrated ground because she was with child illegitimately. And so she was buried in a field somewhere. No idea which field. So, events started happening when this gravestone was moved. And one of the first signs was words appearing. Okay, the word read in Welsh words appearing on the walls, and it was an English couple who were living there. And one of the words read, is it Tangifed? Okay, which won't be how it's correctly pronounced. But I've given it my best shot, which is Welsh for peace. Okay, and it was written on the inside wall of the home, which was a little bit strange. Stains on the wall. Yeah, it's an old house. You're going to get damp stains on the wall. That's kind of one things. But there are kind of a few kind of strange things, as I say. Children singing in the house could often be heard at the time. But how would that relate to the woman that was living there and died in childbirth? Maybe she's buried in the field at the farm. That would make sense, wouldn't it? And maybe the gravestone was to mark that she was buried in the field of the farm. I'm just looking for logical explanations here. That would make logical sense. I say muffled voices in empty rooms. Things can echo in older houses, but and then let's have a look. You can't really explain a large wooden owl moving across the house on its own, can you? There's no real explanation for that one. No, not really. And also the pregnant girl appearing on the patio and then disappearing. Well, clearly it's possibly Jane Jones, isn't it? You would seem logical. Now, apparently the owner of the house, one day she was moving some dried flowers that had started to look a bit worse for wear. Okay, so she took them from the lounge to the kitchen and she popped them on the counter, dropping petals everywhere. Which do, anybody that's got some old rose petals or anything like that, you carry it from one room in a vase, and they do tend to fall off and you have to go back and pick them all up. Now, someone came to the door when she put the flowers in the kitchen on the counter, and when she came back from answering it, all of the petals had disappeared, and in the place were dead or dying wasps, which is a bit strange. You can't really explain that, unless, of course, the wasps were kind of dying in the flowers, but that doesn't really seem relevant. So that's a bit of a strange one. You kind of, that kind of makes you think. Now, one night the resident awoke, okay, and she saw a monk figure standing over the cot when her child was sleeping. Which really freaked her out, understandably. And then she saw figures in the corner of her eye, door latches being lifted and dropped. That seems quite a common one. Remember, you had the old sort of door latches lifted up. Now, the figures out of your corner right, I can kind of associate with that one, because when we lived in an old farmhouse in Scotland, in Ayrshire, I did quite often see things out of the corner of my eye and thought, did I just see something then moving, or was it my imagination? And you do learn to live with these things. You do sort of get used to them. I think I've never saw any, didn't have any kind of latches being lifted up and down. The ex-husband did see a blonde woman in the house and also outside the house. And he thought that it was me, actually. He glanced up, thought it was me, carried on with what he was doing. He was sawing up some wood behind the house. And then I appeared in a different direction, and he was like, how did you get there so quickly? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I saw you over there. And I was like, well, I wasn't over there. I've only just come out of the house. And then also he's heard like movements. And so he saw a couple of things as well. And I saw, so you kind of think, it just had that feeling about it as well. But it wasn't a happy place. It was not a happy place at all. And I think I've spoken about this before. And I think maybe going back to the kind of Wrexham mould one, I can kind of see maybe why they did have the exorcism. Because if you do have a ghostly, unhappy presence in the house, I think that can actually affect the atmosphere of the place. And there definitely are. I mean, I don't know, not everyone can kind of like feel these sort of things, but there's, when I go into houses, quite often I kind of think, yeah, there's a really nice feeling in this house. It's really, really welcoming. Something I did experience, I haven't told him yet, Mr. Bumble. He doesn't listen anyway, it's all right. He hears me talking enough. He doesn't want to hear me listen to me on podcasts as well. But Mr. Bumble's daughter does though, so she might listen to it. So I was in the kitchen. I was in the house. I'm in his house on my own, and I went into the kitchen, and there was a really strong smell of perfume. And I don't know. I mean, maybe I don't know. I don't think no, because I don't think I'm not. I don't know. I can't explain it. And I meant to ask whether or not his. I don't know. There's a really strong smell of perfume anyway, which I couldn't kind of account for. It was a bit strange. So, but we'll see if that repeats itself. I'll see if I see anything else. And there certainly isn't any sort of feeling in the house. There's nothing there. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. But there are definitely kind of like feelings. The farmhouse I lived in, I didn't pick up on it. I think because we were kind of sort of technically homeless at the time, and we kind of just wanted to kind of move somewhere really. The horses in a remote field in the snow. It wasn't really ideal, and so I think I didn't really kind of associate, the feeling of the house when I kind of first went in there, which otherwise if I'd been in a different environment, maybe I probably wouldn't have noticed it, but maybe I would have noticed it rather. So anyway, so that's me for today. Okay, I've waffled on long enough. I've managed to get it done. My voice is just about coped with the whole thing. I've got 20 minutes done, so I'm going to leave it there. And so I've got some really exciting ideas for podcast next week. And there's one that I want to do on palm oil, okay? Because everyone's spouting about palm oil, and I don't know if you've seen it. And there's this guy, I've shared it onto my story a few times on social media, and he's basically involved in the dairy business somehow. And he's talking about palm oil and how it kind of like, it's now in Cadbury's chocolate. Now, I wrote to Cadbury's chocolate, okay, several years ago when the Americans took it over, about a year after that. And I said, or maybe it was before then, I can't actually remember, but I remember writing to Cadbury's and said, have you changed the recipe of your chocolate? Because it's not what it used to be. And it turns out then they're using palm oil instead of cow's milk, and it doesn't taste as creamy anymore. And it's not nice. I mean, I don't like it. I bought a big pack of chocolate buttons, remembering how chocolate buttons used to taste. And I tasted it. I tasted a couple. I thought, I probably had about 10. I thought, I'm not enjoying this. It's just really chemically, and it tastes disgusting. So I actually chucked the whole packet in the bin, and I've not bought Cadbury's chocolate since. I'd probably buy a finger of fudge because there's not much chocolate on that. I do like the ice creams, although apparently they contain palm oil as well. But hey, the ice creams are really nice. But apparently the Karamak white chocolate buttons don't have palm oil in them. And it actually says on the back if you have a look. So I'm going to be having a look in future and seeing what chocolate. I'm going to check. I don't think Galaxy's got palm oil in it. But I'm going to be checking the ingredients now of all chocolate I buy, because I think it affects the taste. It's just not as nice. And chocolate's extortionately expensive at the moment. So, you kind of want to be getting, something decent if you buy it. Anyway, that's my rant about palm oil and Cadbury's chocolate over with. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that one, and I'll catch you next time.